Welcome guys, it's that time when I go through and rate each and every one of the drivers, how they got on over the whole of the Canadian Grand Prix weekend. And this weekend we got a new race winner. Mercedes hit the front finally this season. George Russell with the race win. We got a protest from the Red Bull team against George Russell for his antics of braking and slowing down behind the safety car. It was a little bit risky, I suppose, when you look at George Russell's front. Was it a bit of gamesmanship trying to get Max Verstappen that final penalty point and see him have that race ban? And that's sort of the angle that Red Bull were going at. They've sort of spoke to the race director before the race, sort of just to sort of make them aware that this could possibly happen. They filed a protest that was dismissed, so George Russell keeps his victory in Canada, and what a race victory he had. Let's go straight to it. As always, we go with the race winner, number one, George Russell. He started on pole, finished lights to flag victory in first place. A brilliant race from him, actually, wasn't it? He got a really good start. There was none of that issues of potentially, we were looking for that first corner battle with Verstappen. Verstappen actually got a bad start and Russell was quite comfortably in the lead. And then from lap 6 or 7, he sort of got that out of the DRS gap of Max Verstappen and then controlled the race pretty comfortably from there on out, didn't he? The only sort of issue that we saw was towards the end of the race where Max did get close to that DRS zone, or you got up to about 1.5 seconds behind George Russell towards the end of the race, but that was more George sort of making his way through the traffic, and he absolutely controlled the whole race perfectly well. The safety car came out. I think he was sort of probably just trying to push that safety car a bit faster, weren't they, just to not have that one more flying lap and just have that pressure. It worked perfectly well for the Mercedes team, wasn't it? A 1-3, both cars on the podium, and George with his first race win this season. He's grown massively this season, hasn't he, into that team, really taken that team leadership role and pulled off some brilliant results so far this season. I mean, he's been really consistent, was on the podium pretty consistently early doors, and then now with a race win, when the opportunity came and does come for George Russell, he absolutely does grasp it with both hands. He very rarely throws it away, and this was a brilliant opportunity for him and Mercedes, and he's done an absolutely fantastic job with this one. I'm giving him a 10 out of 10, hardly surprising, that one. Second place man, Max Verstappen, and I thought he had a really good race. Another really good strategy call from the Red Bull team. They managed the strategy side of things fantastically well, like they did in Barcelona. The surprise was how much he struggled in his first stint when Kimi Antonelli by lap 12 was making the move. I mean, he darted into the pits at that stage and you thought, ooh, could they be in trouble, because the tyre deg was really difficult, and it looked like maybe initially you thought, the first stint you knew how much he just had to get in front of George Russell to try and control the race from the front. We know how much he likes to do that, and did he push that first stint a little bit too hard, and that's why he struggled, and we saw Antonelli closing up. But it happened again after that first stop, didn't it? And we got Kimi Antonelli again getting into the DRS zone, and it looked like he was a sitting duck towards the end, and we thought, well, personally I thought, oh look, this is going to get tasty here. It looks like Kimi Antonelli, with his driving the way he was going, was on for a P2 and Mercedes 1-2, which have been absolutely phenomenal. But Red Bull sort of saw the opportunity to call Max in at that second stop early, helped with the undercut, and he literally only just made it out ahead of Kimi Antonelli. They were sort of side by side at the end of the second stops for the pair of them, and it was a brilliant job from Red Bull from there on, and Max controlled that third stint on that set of tyres brilliantly well, because he had to do 26 laps on his first hards, and he was struggling when Kimi Antonelli got up and close behind, and it was 32 laps he had to do on the hards on that third run. And so you thought, an extra six laps, how will he manage that one? Because yes, the fuel loads are coming down, it should be a little bit easier on his tyres, but the Mercedes looked really strong, but Max did a phenomenal job and held on to a brilliant second place for him, and it looks even better when he's beaten both McLarens, and Lando Norris has gone out and he's gained up big points on the pair of them. So a really good weekend for him when you look at it on the championship side as well. I'm giving him an 8 out of 10. Third place man, Kimi Antonelli, my driver of the day, because I thought he drove absolutely brilliantly. The first start for him when he got that pass around the outside of Oscar Piastri, I thought was a really, really good move. He knew that Oscar had more to lose than he did. I mean, Oscar's got a championship to worry about, and I think Oscar was unusually defensive against Kimi, because it looked for all the world that the position that Oscar put himself in, that he had that sort of third place sort of covered on lap one, but Kimi with a great move put it on Oscar, and from that really made his race. And then towards the end of that first stint, like I said, he was really, really racy right up into the back of Max Verstappen. Max pitted very early on that first stint. When you compare it to the rest of the front runners, everyone else went at least 2 laps more than he did. So you can't really blame Mercedes and can't expect them to do the undercut that early, because Red Bull really did pit early on that one. But when we've seen Antonelli get into the DRS or close to the DRS of Max Verstappen towards the end of that lap, should they have bring him Antonelli in 1 lap earlier to get the undercut on Max Verstappen, because we've seen the pace that Antonelli had, and I think he could have then really got a P2, which would have been a phenomenal result. And I think that's the only downside, and I think it's more strategy call potentially than an error on Antonelli's side. But he did say that he pushed a little bit too hard when he came up outside on the second stint with Verstappen, pushed a little too hard, and that got him graining on his tyres, and therefore he couldn't really take the fight to Verstappen like he did in the early parts of the race. So a little bit of management there, something to just think about, because you can tell that's a young head. Seen Verstappen and thought, right, I'm going to go straight after him, and really didn't nurse these tyres in to get the best of them, which would have helped him sort of later on in that race. And then he had Oscar Piastri and the McLaren, both of them bearing down on him at the end, and he controlled that absolutely brilliantly well. There was a couple of laps, weren't there, where Oscar was all over him, and he managed it fantastically well. A brilliant P3. Hats off to the kid. He's done an absolutely tremendous job. Nothing but a 10 out of 10 for me, because it was a phenomenal drive from him. Fourth place man, Oscar Piastri, started in third, finished in fourth in the end. I think he might be a little bit disappointed with his defensive work against Antonelli in turn 1. But from there onwards, he got back into the DRS zone of Kimi Antonelli, but very late on, lap 57. The McLaren really struggled around this circuit for pace. It's not the usual dominant McLaren we've seen pretty much all season, because for all the world, I expected Oscar to be pretty much all over the back of Antonelli by the end of the first stint, and even into the second stint very early on, but he just didn't really have that pace, the dominant pace. It did come alive towards the end of the race, but I think he left a little bit too much for him to do, and he kind of said that, this is probably the best we could have done this weekend, which is interesting, because this car has been so dominant and the class of the field all season, and to see it really struggle here. Yes, Canada's a very different track to what we see for most of the grid, or most of the circuits that we go to, and that maybe it's just something track specific. Everybody's sort of saying that. We see that, we've seen year on year now where Mercedes come here and absolutely dominate, and then absolutely nowhere going at other circuits. So, I wouldn't read too much into it yet. McLaren aren't a million miles away, but they'll be back at the front next weekend. I'm no doubts about that. But this one was a difficult weekend for Oscar Piastri, I'd say, considering where he's been. But decent enough. His championship rival and his teammate ended up hitting the back of him and crashed out. I don't think it was Oscar's fault at all. Norris took all the blame on that front. But a decent result. I'm giving him a 7 out of 10 for this weekend. Fifth place man, Charles Leclerc, started in 8th, finished in 5th in the end. And I thought it was a very decent race from him, actually, in his Ferrari. His first stint was absolutely brilliant. Was running very, very long on the hards, like Lando Norris, and made the most of it. Was running P2, wasn't he? Then pit and came out P6 ahead of his teammate, Lewis Hamilton, who was really struggling. But he was really annoyed with his team, wasn't he? Just thought, why have we gone onto the hards? Didn't give the options for the mediums and run 2 medium stints. Afterwards, he sort of come round to it and said, look, I don't think it would have made too much of a difference. When he came out after his second stop, he had about 12 seconds to Lando Norris. So even on the fresher mediums, he didn't really gain too much time on Norris in the end on that final run. So I think that he just thought, this is probably the best that we can do. Bit upgrades needed. Both drivers really calling for that, potentially the big upgrade package. The first part of that we should see in Austria, and then definitely by Silverstone. So that really needs to rock up now, doesn't it? We've heard rumours of it. We've only had little bits popping up on this car, but the big package apparently now coming in the next 2 races. So let's see how that affects them. But they really need that to take the fight to the front guys ahead of them, because they now seem to have dropped behind or battling with Mercedes most races. They're definitely not in the fight with McLaren or Red Bull of where they want to be. But a solid P5 for Charles Leclerc. I'm giving him an 8 out of 10. 6th place man Lewis Hamilton started in 5th, finished in 6th, got damaged early on. He drove over a groundhog, didn't he? And that caused massive damage on his car, and then had other issues to manage throughout that race. And that was, just a difficult one for him. Decent qualifying session, but then the strategy calls wasn't fantastic for him either, was it? The first pits, he came out and stuck in traffic, and he lost about 10 seconds when he all said and done in the traffic on that one. I don't think there was much more possible for him anyway, because I think the cars and the damage that he had would have meant that Leclerc was probably always going to be a bit faster than him. And then his race was pretty much in no man's land. He wasn't really pushing Charles Leclerc and had a healthy gap to the guys behind. A 6 out of 10 for me for this weekend. 7th place finish, Fernando Alonso, a brilliant qualifying up in P6 and finished 7th in the end. He said that was probably the maximum he could have done. There was no way he felt like he could have held on to P6. The guys behind him were in much faster cars. They've shown that they've got really good qualifying pace, and they kind of really need to work on the race pace now to try and hold on to the good positions that they're now getting themselves in qualifying. But overall, he was very happy. I mean, it's been a stark contrast the last couple of races where these upgrades have come and finally worked, because they were looking at just barely close to points, not even picking up points. So now to be fighting in that position, he can be very happy with that. Came out after the second stops P9 and was closing on Nico Hülkenberg, a really good move on him, and that got him up into P8, and then eventually turned P7 with Norris's crash. Too far and too much to do to close on Lewis Hamilton, but a very, very good race from him. More points finally again after picking up his first points of the season in Spain. I'm giving Fernando Alonso an 8 out of 10. 8th place finisher Nico Hülkenberg started in 11th, made up 3 places to finish 8th in the end, and 2 of them places he made up early on, didn't he? Where he got fortunate and made the most of the battle with Franco Colapinto and Alex Albon and nicked them 2 places. Got himself up into P9 and then moved up ahead. He was good strategy calls, couldn't hold off Fernando Alonso in the end on the older tyres, but he said now with these upgrades the car is much more predictable and they're able to push at the right time to try and hold and keep these positions, and that's really what's helped them now fight for really good points. 2 weekends back-to-back points for Sauber and Nico Hülkenberg. Can be very, very happy with that. I've given him a 9 out of 10. 9th place man Esteban Ocon, and he made it into my 3 good for this race weekend, didn't he? Absolutely brilliant drive. The overcut was worked fantastically well for him in his first stint. Went very, very long on that hards, got himself up into P8. Really, really amazing drive and first stint. I think that really helped, where all the sort of potentially faster guys were getting out and then stuck in the DRS drain and unable to sort of make it past slightly slower cars, and that's why the overcut really did work for him and the Haas team. A brilliant drive, because normally when we see this car qualify badly, it just shows that it's really not quite suited to this track, and they're resigned to sort of driving around 14th, 15th place, but to come home and pick up a P9, I was very, very impressed with that. A fantastic points for the team on their 200th race. A brilliant job. I'm giving him a 9 out of 10. 10th place man Carlos Sainz, last of a points finisher, and a decent job actually. I think we qualified in P16, which was actually a bad qualifying session, but made up good places up at the start. A nice dive bomb on Ollie Berman up into P11 was one of the moves, wasn't it? And he just, he was the normal aggressive Carlos Sainz that we've seen. Early struggles at the part of the race, but a very good finish finish at the end. He said, they had real car troubles and had to manage a lot of issues with that car to get that home in the end. So given the issues, he was very, very happy with a point, but felt like there was probably more in it without them issues for this car at this circuit, because they started FP1, right at the front. So it looked like this car would do really well around here. Picked up points for Carlos Sainz, a decent result. He was happy in the end of giving him a 7 out of 10. 11th place man, Ollie Berman. You'd say he made up 2 places, but it was a bit of a scruffy race for Ollie Berman. He started in 13th, finished in 11th in the end. Had a few off-track excursions, and that was, just put a bit of a downer on his race overall. Tried the one-stop strategy, it didn't really work. And overall, just a bit of a scruffy race for him this weekend. We'd probably hoping for at least a point, but it's obviously teammates nicked that up ahead of him. I'm giving him a 5 out of 10 for this weekend. 12th place finish for Yuki Tsunoda, started in 18th in the end, obviously because we got the 2 guys starting in the pit lane, even though he had that 10 place grid drop for passing under the red flag, which really put him on the back foot. I mean, his qualifying wasn't great. He was P11, or due to that P11 had there been no penalty anyway, but a bit of a difficult race weekend for him overall. Went for the one stop, and the safety car, he said, came at a really bad time for him, where he was looking to sort of go and be aggressive and make up positions. Didn't get the opportunity to do that, so he was overall happier with the car, felt he was better with the car, and the upgrades kind of really helped him with his driving style, but still not enough. Made the move on Alex Albon and Carlos Sainz, and got himself up to 11th place at one point. But from there onwards, not particularly fantastic yet, is it? This car needs to be scoring decent points as a bare minimum. You're talking, 6th, 7th place kind of at worst. Max Verstappen driving home in second. You can't expect him to do that, but so far he's still no points again this weekend. So probably disappointing. Feels that it's probably a little bit more for him to do to try and prove that he can keep this seat. A 4 out of 10 weekend for me for Yuki. 13th place man, Franco Colapinto, and he had a brilliant qualifying session to get himself up into P10, and from there he was really sort of thinking like a decent race result might be on, but it was a struggle for him this weekend. Their car really slowed down the straights, and that didn't help with them at all to try and gain positions. He had a bad slow first stop, and that put him back in the pack, and he was in the DRS train. And when you've got the slowest engine down the straight, you're always going to struggle a little bit. You can probably be overall be a little bit happy with the weekend, I suppose, but still no points. Decent performance, you'd probably have to say yes. Ticks a couple of boxes, especially with that P10 qualifying. You can be very happy with that. Beat his teammate. But yeah, nothing spectacular shown just yet. Will he retain his seat? He's got one more race to go, isn't it, out of this 5 race contract? So let's see what happens after Austria. It'll be really interesting to see if he manages to carry on, or will they throw Jack Doohan back in there in his place? Let's wait and see. A 5 out of 10 for me for this weekend. 14th place man, Gabi Bartoletto, started in 15th, finished 14th in the end. He went for the first stint, a very long first stint on that hards, and it really didn't work well for him like it did for Ocon. And then it just was slow. Another race where he's finished 14th place, comfortably beaten by his teammate, and a race where there's nothing really to write home about. I've just given him a 4 out of 10 for this weekend. 15th place finish for Pierre Gasly, started in the pits, and from there you always thought he knew it was going to be a struggle, especially in this car when you've not got the straight line speed, and it was how he's predicted pretty much in the end, wasn't it? It just didn't really go anywhere. He was going backwards. He got pushed off track when he tried to pass Lance Stroll. I thought it was a little bit harsh that Stroll got a 10-second penalty for that one. But it is what it is, and yeah, it didn't really affect Gasly's race massively, I don't think, from there, but they just didn't have any pace and could just really struggle to overtake, stuck in the DRS train. I've given him a 4 out of 10. 16th place man, Isaac Hadjar, and a really difficult weekend for him, and he's been brilliant so far for much of this season. It was bound to happen though. The 3rd place grid penalty really didn't help him, put him down in 12th place, and then he struggled in the race. He pit early and that didn't help him at all. He then started to get graining on his medium tyres, and then stuck in the DRS train. The car just wasn't there for him this weekend, and we've seen that with a number of teams. This track, either your car really likes likes it, like the Mercedes, and it lit up and flew, or it doesn't, and it just was one of them tracks for the Racing Bulls, because this car has generally been pretty good at most circuits. Didn't like this one, and neither did Isaac Hadjar. I've given him a 3 out of 10. 17th place man Lance Stroll got a 10-second penalty, like I said, for the incident with Pierre Gasly. I thought that was a little bit harsh, I do have to say. It didn't really just push him, force him straight off track. I mean, Gasly's front tyre was just towards the rear tyre of Lance Stroll, and with these massive cars, it's really difficult to see exactly where or how close your rear tyre would be to their front tyre at speed and when you're looking at the corner. So I did feel that was a little bit harsh, but from there on, it was a poor qualifying session and a poor race, and really interesting surprised to see him take part in this race, because he just didn't look like he was ready for it at all. The wrist injury or whatever, it looked like it might have played a part in this one, and for all honesty, and if he's honest with himself, I think he really should have sat this one out. A difficult race weekend. I'm giving him a 3 out of 10. On to the DNFs then. We got the first of them, Alex Albon. He managed to do lap 49 his power unit went, but they were talking on the radio very, very early on that we've got similar issues to what we saw last time out with that engine, and he just wasn't happy at all with the team and their strategy calls. He went very, very long on the mediums, almost too long, but that was almost self-sabotage, wasn't it, where he said, I'm not coming in now once I've sort of got through the pain on this medium tyre. But he was 2 seconds a lap slower than the guys around him, came out last, and then lap 49 the power unit went. Difficult weekend for him, a bad start as well, cost him 2 places, bouncing over the track. I've given him a 5 out of 10 this weekend. That's probably generous. I think of 4 out of 10. 4 out of 10 for Alex Albon. Next up, the DNFs. Liam Lawson got to lap 56 in the end. Power unit issue, which is surprising because he had a new power unit at the start of the race, went super long in his first stint, and then was out last, and it was absolutely miles away. He was like 20 seconds to P19 at one stage. He put on the mediums, and it just, well, it was going to be a real struggle to even make 20 seconds up on the guy ahead, even when you've got fresher and better tyres. A struggle of a weekend, and then they had cooling issues and had to save the power unit, the new power unit that they've just put in. Can't afford that to blow when you've got limited engines, and it was a forced retirement from there. Disappointing overall. I've given him a 4 out of 10. And the last of the DNFs, last but not least, Lando Norris, with that incident with his teammate lap 66, but overall it's been a bad weekend. Qualified in P7, and that really put him on the back foot. In the race though, you've got to say, he did come alive towards the end, and to get, when he came out at the second stop, he had 7.5 seconds to make up on Oscar Piastri. He was absolutely helped by the poor blue flags for Oscar, and the timings of him trying to pass the slower cars didn't help him one bit, and from there on, he just made a mistake when he tried to make that move on Oscar Piastri. Held his hand up. Why he went for that inside line when he was clearly being blocked off, misjudged the gap or the speed to Piastri, and broke his front wing and into the wall. Difficult weekend, poor qualifying, and it's cost him massively in the championship. He's now got a big gap, and he's 22 points now to Oscar Piastri in the championship after that incident, and it really has put him on the back foot. A poor weekend in every sort of aspect, really. A 3 out of 10 for him for this weekend. On to the predictions, and it's my predictions were probably as bad as Lando Norris's race. Just one correct call this weekend, and that was in the qualifying. I did predict Piastri to take pole, Verstappen second, and Hamilton third. It was Verstappen second in qualifying, is the only one I got right. Russell took pole position, which is probably not a surprise. I did call that in my predictions pre the Canadian Grand Prix, and for the race I had Piastri, Norris and Leclerc for the win, and I thought it'd be a good weekend for Ferrari and a bad one for Red Bull. But yeah, it was a bad weekend. 5th and 6th, probably the best Ferrari could hope for, and they were really in that top 3 like I predicted. And Mercedes were absolutely brilliant. It was a brilliant weekend for them. 1 and 3, Verstappen second, and so it wasn't a bad weekend for Red Bull at all, is it? When Max Verstappen is coming home in P2, he drove a brilliant race, so probably need better luck next time. But 2 weeks time we go to the Austrian Canadian Grand Prix, and that's where it kicked off last year, didn't we? We got the explosive on-track action with Norris and Verstappen. Will we see something similar next time out? Who knows? But I do expect McLaren to bounce back next time. It should be a brilliant one. Watch out for the Austrian Grand Prix preview coming a week today, Monday, before race weekend. It should be brilliant. Can't wait for the action to get going. The season just seems to be flying by. We're getting absolutely fantastic races. And hats off and well done to Mercedes for this weekend. A 1-3. Kimi Antonelli coming back into it again. George Russell with another brilliant win, and it looks like for all the world to be signing that contract up with Mercedes pretty soon, because they've got a solid driver with George, haven't they? Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment. As always, see you in the next one.